Something was wrong with the house on Maple Street. I used to think my family was just like everyone else's, ordinary, predictable, maybe even a little boring. We lived in a 2-story house on Maple Street, the kind with squeaky stairs and a front porch swing that groaned every time someone sat on it. My father, James, was a school teacher with an encyclopedic memory and a laugh that could fill an entire room. My mother, Maria, worked part-time at the local library and smelled like old books and lavender. Then there was my older brother, Caleb, 2 years ahead of me, always getting into some sort of trouble but managing to charm his way out of it. And me, Lily, the quiet one, always observing, always wondering where I truly fit in. At first glance, we were picture perfect. We took family road trips every summer, posed awkwardly for Christmas cards, and fought over board games like it was a national sport. But if you looked closer, if you listened during the pauses between conversations or noticed the silence after certain topics came up, you'd sense something unspoken. A tension that lived in the walls. A secret that no one mentioned, but everyone felt. I didn't start asking questions until I turned 16. That was the year everything changed, the year Caleb stopped coming home on weekends, the year Dad started locking his office door, and the year Mom stopped smiling when she thought no one was watching. It all started with one letter. A yellow envelope slipped under the front door on a rainy afternoon. No return address. No postage. Just my name written in a hand I didn't recognize. I stared at the yellow envelope for what felt like hours, the paper already damp at the corners from where I'd held it too tightly. My name was written in careful, looping script. Lily. No last name. Just Lily. It looked familiar, but not recent. Something about the way the Y curved reminded me of how my mother used to sign my birthday cards when I was little. But she hadn't handwritten anything for me in years, she'd switched to typed notes on the fridge or quick texts. Besides, if she'd sent the letter, why not just hand it to me? I tucked it under my sweater and ran up to my room, locking the door behind me even though no one else was home. I sat cross-legged on the bed, heart pounding like I'd stolen something. I had no reason to feel guilty, but I did. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of lined notebook paper, yellowed at the edges. The handwriting was the same, slanted and elegant. There were only 2 sentences. Ask your father about October 12, 1999. And when he lies, ask your brother. I read it over and over until the words stopped making sense. I was born in 2002. So whatever happened in 1999 wasn't about me. Or was it? I hid the letter beneath a loose floorboard in my closet, an old hiding spot I used as a kid for candy or report cards I didn't want my parents to see. Now, it held a different kind of secret. That night at dinner, I studied Dad's face as he passed the mashed potatoes, wondering what he looked like in 1999. He was smiling, asking about school, telling Caleb to stop texting at the table. Nothing seemed off. But now that I was looking for it, the cracks were obvious. The way Mom kept avoiding eye contact. The fact that Caleb barely said a word the entire meal. I didn't say anything about the letter. Not yet. But that night, I stayed up late scrolling through old family photo albums. Most of the pictures were happy ones, picnics in the park, beach days, birthday cakes. But the year 1999 was missing entirely. Nothing before 2000. I checked the digital archives on my mom's laptop too. Still nothing. I held the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Caleb's words echoed in my head like a slow booming bell. You weren't supposed to know. Not ever. What does that mean? I whispered. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. Then he said quietly, "Where are you right now?" "In my room." "Good. Close the door. Lock it." I did as he said without thinking. The click of the lock felt heavier than usual. "Okay," I said, sitting on my bed, knees pulled to my chest. He sighed, and I imagined him sitting in his dorm room, probably in that ratty chair he always dragged into video calls. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you," he said. "Mom and Dad. They made me promise never to talk about it. But now that you know the date, I guess you've already opened the door." "What happened?" I asked. My voice was small. "October 12, 1999 was the day you were born." I blinked. "What? That's not possible. My birthday is April 14, 2002. He didn't say anything. "You were saying I was born before that? Like they lied on my birth certificate?" He exhaled. "Yes. You were born in 99. They changed your documents after we moved towns." I felt dizzy. My heart raced in my chest. But why would they do that? Why would they lie about my age, About my life. There was a rustling sound like he was pacing. Because of what happened the day you were born, Caleb said. Because of her. Her who? Another pause. Your twin sister. The world stopped. I stared at the floor, not comprehending. My what? You had a twin, Caleb said. Her name was Lila. You and she were born in a small clinic in Blackwood. It was Mom's idea to keep it quiet, home birth, no hospital records. But something went wrong. I felt like I couldn't breathe. She didn't make it, Lily. Lila died that night. But no one talks about her. Ever. Not Mom, not Dad. It's like she never existed. They told me I had to forget. But I was almost 6. I remember everything. He sounded tired. Worn down by years of silence. I couldn't speak. The idea of a twin, of another me, gone, was too much. I remember holding her hand, he continued. I remember Dad screaming for help. And I remember them burying her. Themselves. No funeral. No obituary. They didn't want questions. Why? I managed to whisper. Why bury her? Because she wasn't. She wasn't okay, Caleb said, voice breaking. She was born not breathing. They tried everything. There was blood. So much blood. I saw things no 5-year-old should ever see. And the clinic? It was illegal. Mom found it through someone she met in a homebirth group. They weren't even licensed. I buried my face in my hands, shaking. After that, Caleb continued, they panicked. They left Blackwood. Changed their names. Changed yours. You became Lily, born in 2002. They wanted to give you a new start. A clean life. They didn't want you to grow up in the shadow of a sister who didn't survive. But I should have known, I said, voice cracking. I should have been told. I know, Caleb said. I fought with them about it. For years. But they said it was better if you never knew. That the trauma would ruin your childhood. And maybe they were right. But now. He trailed off. Now what? I asked. I don't think the past is staying buried. Someone left you that letter. Someone else knows. I tried asking casually the next day. Hey, Dad, I said, leaning against the kitchen counter while he made coffee. What were you and Mom doing in 1999? Like, where did we live? He stiffened just enough that I noticed. Then smiled. Oh, same old. We were in Denver back then, I think. No kids yet. Just working, saving up. But no pictures? I asked. He shrugged. Digital cameras weren't as common. You know how it was. I nodded, but the lie clanged in my ears like a dropped pot. It wasn't the words, it was the practiced ease of them. Like he'd been waiting for this question for years. I didn't press him. Instead, I called Caleb later that night. He was at college, and we rarely talked beyond the occasional sarcastic text. When he answered, I didn't even say hello. What happened on October 12, 1999? Silence. Then, where did you hear that? I froze. His voice was flat, serious in a way I'd never heard. A letter. It was left at the house. Someone said I should ask Dad, and when he lied, to ask you. Another pause. Then he said the words that chilled me. Lily. You weren't supposed to know. Not ever. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Mom said. We didn't know how to grieve one child while raising the other. I understood the pain in her voice. I really did. But something still didn't sit right. Why had they gone so far as to erase my sister's existence? Why keep it a secret for almost 2 decades, even from Caleb? And most of all, why did it feel like my father was still hiding something? The next morning, I waited until Dad came home from his overnight shift at the auto shop. He always poured himself a glass of whiskey, even before sleep. I caught him before he got to it. Can we talk? I asked. My voice was calm, but inside I was shaking. He looked tired, like always. But when he met my eyes, something in his expression shifted. Like he already knew. I know about Lila, I said. He didn't flinch. He just sat down, heavy and slow, like gravity was stronger on him than everyone else. She would have looked just like you, he said, voice low. We couldn't tell you because. We thought you'd grow up asking why her and not me. And you didn't think I already felt that way? I said. Even without knowing her? He didn't answer. I pulled out the glass jar I'd found. Set it on the table between us. His eyes locked onto it. I thought I saw his fingers twitch. You left this, didn't you? Dad nodded slowly. Your mom couldn't do it. I went every year, on her birthday. There was a pause. Then he added something that changed everything. But that apartment, that project? That wasn't just about air conditioning. It was my work. That's why we kept everything so quiet. I blinked. What do you mean, your work? He leaned back and rubbed his hands together. I used to be a biomedical HVAC engineer, he said. Worked with a university lab on environmental control systems. We were trying to design filtered air that could be customized for patients with respiratory diseases, especially kids with severe asthma. That apartment was one of our live test sites. I stared at him. I had never heard a single word about this part of his life. All I knew was that he fixed cars and drank whiskey. But this? This was something else. Lila died in that apartment? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded again. There was a power failure. Generator didn't kick in. The system shut off during the night. She was only 2 weeks old. She couldn't breathe. I felt a lump in my throat. You blamed yourself. He looked away. I still do. Suddenly, everything made a little more sense. The sudden move, the way they distanced themselves from everyone they knew, how Dad never talked about his past. The shame. The guilt. The weight of one miscalculation. And perhaps a little fear that if anyone found out, it would ruin him. But why hide it from Caleb? I asked. Dad sighed. We thought he was too young. And by the time he was old enough, it just felt too late. Then, well, he started acting out, and we were afraid bringing it up would make things worse. I sat there in silence for a moment, piecing it all together. You could have told me. I know. You should have. I know that, too. There was another pause. Then I asked the question I hadn't dared to ask before. Do you still have anything from her? A photo? A blanket? Anything? He got up without a word and disappeared into the basement. I waited, the silence buzzing. 10 minutes later, he came back with a small wooden box. He placed it in front of me like it was made of glass. Inside were a hospital bracelet with the name Lila Grace, a tiny knitted hat in pale yellow, a single photo of a newborn, hooked up to tubes, sleeping, and a letter, in Mom's handwriting, addressed to the daughter we couldn't keep. I cried. For her. For my parents. For the silence. For the years lost to pretending nothing ever happened. The wooden box sat open on the kitchen table, its fragile contents catching the morning light. My fingers trembled as I reached for the folded envelope labeled to the daughter we couldn't keep. It was Mom's handwriting, delicate, looping, a little shaky. My father quietly got up and left the room, giving me space. It was the first time in my life I'd seen him walk away from a conversation without needing to win it. Maybe he understood this moment wasn't about him anymore. I unfolded the letter slowly. Dear Lila Grace, I'm writing this on the night we brought you home. You're only 4 pounds, 6 ounces, and your cry sounds more like a kitten than a baby. Your brother Caleb peeked into your crib earlier and whispered, "She looks like a marshmallow." I laughed through the tears because he wasn't wrong. We brought you here because this apartment has the best air system in the region. Your father helped design it, and it was supposed to be safe, safer than the hospital. But I'm scared, Lila. I'm so scared. Your lungs are weak, and I don't know if we're strong enough to handle losing you. I can't even write more than this without breaking. If you're reading this, it means, well, maybe you've grown up, and we were blessed with time. Or maybe someone you love is reading it to you to show how much you were loved, even in the shortest time. You changed us. Forever. Love, Mom. I read it twice before the words stopped blurring. The rawness of her words stung. For all the silence, all the years of pushing down her grief, this single letter revealed more than anything she had ever said aloud. It was a love deeper than guilt, more powerful than time. I looked again at the items in the box. I imagined Mom, younger, terrified, carefully folding that tiny yellow hat. I imagined Caleb peeking over the edge of a crib, too small to understand what sick really meant. I imagined a future that never happened. And yet, here I was. Alive. Breathing. 24 years old. Carrying the weight of a sister I never met, of a tragedy I was never told, and a family I was only just beginning to truly understand. I placed the letter back in the box. When I stepped outside, my father was in the garage. He was pretending to clean, but I could see it in his body, the tension in his shoulders, the redness in his eyes. He didn't know how to ask if I was okay. So I did it for him. "I'm going to tell Caleb," I said. He nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "He deserves to know too," I added. "We all do." That night, I called my brother. I told him to come over, that we needed to talk. When he arrived, he looked surprised to see both of our parents sitting in the living room. They looked smaller than usual. Not weak, just human. We didn't dive into it right away. We talked around it, circling the truth like it might bite. But eventually, I reached for the wooden box and set it on the table. I told him about Lila. Caleb's reaction wasn't dramatic. He didn't yell or cry or break anything. He just sat there for a long time, staring at the photo. Finally, he said, "I always felt like something was missing." There was no blame in his voice. Just wonder. A quiet ache finally named. He picked up the yellow hat, held it for a moment, then placed it gently back in the box. "Thank you for telling me," he said. Later, after he left, I found myself walking into the room that used to be my childhood bedroom. The walls were bare now. But I sat on the floor and whispered, "I'm sorry I never knew you, Lila." I didn't expect an answer. But for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel so heavy. 1 week after we found the letter, I sat in the backyard with my mom, watching the wind dance through the branches of the old maple tree. The air smelled of early autumn, dry grass, fading leaves, and something a little nostalgic. She hadn't spoken much since the night we opened the box. But today, she looked at me and said softly, "Do you want to see her?" At first, I didn't understand. But then she reached into the pocket of her sweater and pulled out a small pendant, a locket I'd seen her wear my whole life, but never once opened. Inside was a photo no bigger than a postage stamp. A sleeping newborn. Pale, delicate, beautiful. Lila. "She lived for 12 days, Mom said." Her voice didn't crack this time. It was steady, even peaceful. Long enough to hear Caleb's voice, to feel sunlight once on her skin, to hold my finger. I stared at the photo, unsure whether to smile or cry. Maybe both. Mom continued, "We buried her in the churchyard, under the oak tree. I visit sometimes. Not as often as I should." She looked away, ashamed. "But I talk to her when I bake. When I see daisies. When I smell rain on pavement." And that's when I realized. She hadn't forgotten her. She had been holding her, every day, in silence. A few days later, we went to the cemetery together. Dad, Caleb, Mom, and me. It was a quiet spot, surrounded by trees that cast dappled shadows on the grass. There was no large gravestone, just a simple flat marker with a name, a date, and 3 words. Lila Grace, loved beyond time. No one said much. We each stood there in our own way, carrying our own thoughts. Caleb crouched and ran his fingers over the engraved letters. Mom whispered something too soft to hear. Dad held her hand for the first time in what felt like years. I brought daisies. I didn't know her favorite flower, how could I? But daisies seemed right. Gentle. Honest. Before we left, I looked back one last time and said quietly, "I know about you now. And I won't forget again." That evening, something shifted in our house. Mom hummed while cooking. Dad offered to help without being asked. Caleb and I stayed at the dinner table long after the food was gone, just talking. About childhood. About things that didn't hurt. It wasn't magic. It didn't fix everything overnight. But it felt like the first real breath after being underwater for years. A month passed. Then 2. The box remained on the bookshelf in the living room, no longer hidden, but not on display. Just present. Like Lila herself. One weekend, Caleb brought over some friends, and one of them pointed to it. "That yours?" He smiled gently. "Nah. My sister's." The guy blinked. "I thought you only had." "I have 2 sisters," Caleb interrupted, with the ease of someone who no longer flinches from the truth. "One's here. One's not. But both matter." And in that moment, I felt more proud of him than I ever had. On what would have been her 25th birthday, we lit a candle. Not because we had to. But because we wanted to. Mom made lemon cake, her own way of remembering. Dad sat next to her with his arm around her shoulder. I played a playlist I'd made of gentle songs, some of which I imagined she might have liked if she were here. And Caleb? He brought a letter. Folded, sealed. He placed it next to the candle and said, "She doesn't need to read it. But I needed to write it." We didn't read it either. That was his moment with her. His healing. Sometimes I still wonder who she would have been. Would she have had Mom's smile? Dad's stubbornness? Would she have loved books like me, or music like Caleb? But more than anything, I'm grateful for what she gave us, even in her absence. She reminded us how fragile family is. How silence can be loud. And how love, even when buried, can still find its way back to the surface. Now, she's no longer a secret. She's part of our story. A name remembered. A life honored. And for the first time in a long, long time, we are whole.